Welcome to SAM Conversation, a program of South Asia Monitor. It's time, 62 years after the Chinese aggression of 1962 October, that we look back in the light of a number of comments and issues that have come up. We'd like to welcome Col Rajinder Singh Kushwaha, who has written and commented a lot on whatever is going on, particularly since the Galwan incident, that is the second aggression in 2020 June. He's from the, he commanded the 3rd Battalion, the Bihar Regiment, and he was one of the first to come up with the facts about what happened in Galwan on the fateful night of 15-16 June 2020. First thing I think we need to recall is the events of pre-1962, the run-up to the 1962 India-China war. Col Kushwaha, what would you mention as the sparking off point?
Anil, thank you very much. You have invited me to give my opinion on as to what happened before the 1962 war took place. Before I start off, there are certain things we must understand. There are two things. First, from 1950 to 1955-56, India's pro-China policy. Thereafter, 1955 to till the 1962 war happened, there was an anti-China policy. So the duplicity we have to understand as to why the war took place in 1962 and what were the reasons for it.
Briefly, if you could, yes.
Yeah. So I'll come to you. Firstly, you must understand the two Asian giants, India and China, they are not complementary countries because one side is a totalitarian government since 1949 when China became independent, and Indian side it was a democracy since 1947. And Chinese geography is about the area is 9.7 million kilometers, whereas India is 1/3 of it, somewhere around 3.27 million kilometers. So there was a mismatch between India and China in 1947-49 onwards. However, in 49, when China became independent or the communists came to power in China, that time the Indian economy was better, Indian military was better than the Chinese. Over a period of time, since 1950 onwards, China got involved in certain wars like Korean War or taking over certain territories. In at that particular time, Jawaharlal Nehru, who was the Prime Minister of India, he had a special liking for China. And you'll see that he was of the opinion that if India has to progress and develop, then it has to be a friendly relation with China. And that is why some of these actions, as I quote to you, when China occupied Tibet in 1950, Jawaharlal Nehru went ahead and supported China. Though at that time, Deputy Prime Minister, before his death, Sardar Patel, on 17 December 1950, he had opposed this. He had advised Nehru not to do it. He said that China will ultimately be our enemy. But Nehru overruled because he was a very tall figure, and Sardar Patel, who could question him, he had died by 1951 beginning. So therefore, there was nobody to check Nehru as to whatever he wanted to do. Well, he was such a towering figure at that particular time. Now, certain things that China occupied Tibet because of the reason that it thought that it was a Chinese territory ruled by Qing dynasty since 17th century. 1644 to 1912. Surprisingly, just a bit of information for you, for all others who will be listening to me, that Xinjiang province, erstwhile known as East Turkmenistan, was once an Indian tributary state during Mahabharata period. It was called as Uttar Kuru. But China occupied in 1951, and this was accepted by Nehru. When India got independence, Britishers left. That time the Indian boundary with Tibet was undefined. Britishers had from time to time earmarked certain lines which they occupied because of Russian invasion from the expansion from that side in that order. So there were boundaries between India and Tibet were not defined. In time to time, they kept on drawing lines as per their interest. But on the eastern side, they had agreement with Tibet, where the Tibet government, where they had defined the McMahon line along the watershed, which ultimately became in 1962 the major cause of the fight between India and China. Here I would like to point out that Arunachal Pradesh, which is currently the bone of contention between India and China, it's called in the Chinese parlance as South Tibet. But however, 1950, China had no attention towards it, and India in 1951 February occupied Tawang, which is also called South Tibet. Point of interest here is that Nehru was so enamored with China. When China entered Tibet in 1950, China requested Nehru to give food and rations. Nehru sent 10,000 mounds or 400 tons of rice for the PLA troops there. So that these are the things when he was basically, trying to be thinking, because that was actually Nehru and Gandhi, they were stuck in the moralistic bug they had. They said the peace is the only way they can carry out progress, and they were not very clear on the pragmatic way of the world goes around today, or even at that particular time. So it was Jairam Daulatram, the governor of Assam, that time in 1951, who
he sent Brigadier Major Bob Cutting
Bob Cutting with 200 men.
Yes,
200 men he sent to capture.
They went and occupied Tawang.
And the Chinese at that particular time, must note, Chinese at that particular time didn't object to it.
Yes.
It is the objection came when I come to it. I'll talk about it only after 1960.
The Chinese did not object, but Nehru was very unhappy. He expressed his
Nehru was very unhappy.
He
was scared that Chinese will do it, but Chinese didn't object. Chinese objection came only after 1960 when Zhou Enlai had come and gone back dejected. As Prime Minister of China had come, no, 1960.
Yes.
He had gone back dejected. Now, Indian border with Tibet was undefined. So there was basically, these lines were drawn by the Britishers only to keeping Russian expansion in mind. Otherwise, they were not ratified. Even the McMahon line was not ratified. The major line, which was Johnson and the Ardag line, which was 1865 when he had surveyed and marked it, which included Aksai chain, because this will come out later in our discussion. McMahon line was in 1940 with the Shimla agreement. They had decided with Tibet, but it was not ratified neither by Tibet or the Britishers. John Arding line was established, earmarked surveyed by Johnson, who was a surveyor of the British Army, British India. So which included, of course, Aksai chain. As I said, Nehru's pro-China approach in 1945 because of he had a moralistic and ethical concerned about peace and harmony and not to occupy, not to go out of our borders. You would know that his famous rebuke to General Roy Butcher when he said, "What, we don't need an army, we have no enemy." So that is the kind of attitude he had about himself. And I already said 400 tons of rice he sent to PLA troops. And when the uproar took place in the parliament in 1951-52, he appointed a committee was appointed by Minister of State for Defense, Himmat Singh, to check as to what can be done to occupy these, to check China. But that report came out in 1953 and no action was taken. Then again, Lieutenant Col Singh, who was newly promoted as Level Corps Commander, he was asked to review the borderline between China and Tibet, Tibet and India. So therefore, he recommended, and in fact, he said that we must booster up our defenses along with Tibet or against China. But nobody listened to him. That report also went to the deep freezer. But Lieutenant Kulwant had made a statement that within 5 to 7 years, India will have a war with China.
That was in which year?
He did it in 55.
55. Okay.
55. Lieutenant Kulwant Singh, he said India will have a war with, in next 5 to 7 years, India will have a war with China. But nobody paid any attention, and the Indian army was still left as it is. Now,
if you could please come to the to the stage now where Nehru is now taking steps which are contrary to they don't show him as as being friendly to China.
Okay, I am coming to that. So in 1954,
yes,
he went to Bandung. The Bandung Conference took place. That Panchsheel Agreement, 5 principles or 5 things were signed with China. When he came back after Bandung Conference and having signed the Panchsheel Agreement, that is the time he was informed that China is constructing a road from Xinjiang province to Tibet, which is called as Tibet Highway or G219. So Nehru was unaware of all the geographical features and other things. So he said, where is our border? Actually, this information had come to him through IB, whose chief was Bholanath Mulek, who had been IB chief from 1950 up to 1964, as long as Nehru was the Prime Minister. 14 years he was the Prime Minister. 14 years he was the IB chief with Nehru. So this information came to him, and Nehru was shocked that I am trying to be friendly. Then he said, please explain to me where are our borders. Then these various lines of the British lines which were drawn, they were explained to him by IB, International Bureau, Intelligence Bureau, Chief IB Malik, the BN Malik, and also the army briefed him. So it was suggested to him that Johnson-Ardagh line, which is the first line drawn by Mr. Johnson in 1865, that should be our boundary with Tibet, because that included Aksai Chin. So therefore, he said, okay, if that is the thing, this is our boundary, then publish our maps showing this is our boundary. So 1954-55, he gave the orders for publication of new maps which showed our boundary with Tibet, a Johnson-Ardagh line. So then he gave 2 orders. Well, on the advice of B.N. Malik, he gave 2 orders. First is a republication of the map where he showed the boundary along the Johnson-Ardagh line. Second order he gave of establishing posts all along the...
Are you referring to the forward posture?
Forward posture, all along the boundary.
How many posts?
60 posts were established by 1962.
60 posts, okay.
60,
Did
60
the Indian Army have the strength to do so? The
No,
numerical
Indian
strength?
Army had actually, you see, while IB was suggesting a forward posture, forward policy, Indian Army led by General Samaya was proposing defense in depth. They did not want to have posts on the borderline.
Well, no, please also clarify, did we have the numerical strength to do so?
No, we didn't have the numerical strength and other
We
things.
did not, yes.
It was, see, after 1952 report by General Kulwant Singh, then a few ITBP was raised and few frontal posts were created by ITBP or under the
Indo-Tibetan Border Police.
Indian Border Police under B.N. Malik. And that time, Nehru also ordered that these posts should carry out a forward patrolling. However, in 1959, a Kanka post incident took place where these ITB people were massacred. So therefore, order was given that these posts, ITBP posts, should be occupied by the army. And army was pushed forward to occupy the 60 posts, which were created by right up to 1962. Before that, in 1950, Lieutenant S.P. Thorat, who was the Western Army, Eastern Army commander, he suggested certain things to be done because army is not competent enough to hold all these posts and fight in the front. So, but the B.N. Malik made a clarification that China will be reluctant to confront India, will not do anything, even if he is in a position to do so. So it was his messages which were Nehru, his ears, Nehru was giving his ears to him, accepting his viewpoints, but army's viewpoint Nehru was not accepting. So the defense in depth versus the forward policy. But after Kanka incident, the forward patrolling by ITB was stopped and the army moved ahead and occupied these forward posts. In 1961, 2nd November 1961, I think, in a cabinet meeting, once again, B.N. Malik impressed upon the Prime Minister that we should carry out a forward posting and China will not do anything. So it was that the restriction which was laid on forward posting that was lifted. Now, here it comes in one of the posts in eastern sector, which is called the Dhola post, was established even ahead of the McMahon line. By 1962, even ahead of the McMahon line, that is even ahead of the accepted border with China, Tibet. On the Ladakh side, on the western side, another post was created in the Galwan Valley. So Chinese objected to it. First thing is the Chinese stated that this is the wrong place you have come in because this is our claim line. So in July 1962, China had garrowed this Gurkha post in Galwan Valley, and this post was then kept garrowed against a company post in the Galwan Valley by Gurkha Regiment. So the Indian Army sent a column of 5 Jat regiment to relieve this. But this was massacred by the Chinese. And this column was sent on 6th of October 1962. Now, on the other side, on the eastern sector, where the Dhola post was there, Chinese had garrowed it on 8th of September. Dhola post, 8th of September, they garrowed it. And it was, so the army headquarters sitting in Delhi. And by that time, this chap, General B.M. Col, had become the CGS and D.K. Palit, Brigadier D.K. Palit was the DMO. They gave the order to the people deployed on Thagla, people like John Dalby's brigade. They were asked to clear a post 1,000 yards northeast of Dhola post, a Chinese post, capture it. and of course so by 20th October, the stage was set for China to take a revenge. In between 1960, the major cause is 1960, Chinese Prime Minister Zhou Enlai had come and he wanted to settle the border issue. At that particular time, China was prepared to barter Nepal or South Tibet with India for Aksai Chin. Aksai Chin is an area of roughly about 38,000 kilometers. And if you add 5,180 kilometers in 1961, which was ceded by Pakistan, it works out about 43,180 square kilometers.
Now, let's come to now 62 years later. Whatever happened then, how is it still affecting us?
Yes, because see, the problem is...
Briefly, if you can just bring that out.
I will do that, but I thought we'll cover it in part 2. That is what comes out in the Brooks HB report of
the Henderson Brooks report.
Henderson Brooks report. Now, you must know what happened in 1960. Zhou Enlai had come to sort out the border, but he wanted to barter Aksai Chin with Nehru, or giving him a Nepal, or what you call Arunachal Pradesh or South Tibet. You take and we'll sort out the border. But Nehru rejected this. And then Mao is said to have told people that let's teach a lesson to Nehru. When Zhou Enlai went back, Mao, in fact, this is recorded by Kissinger in his book and in his autobiography. Mao told him that I want to teach a lesson to Nehru. Because Nehru was once his great friend till 1954. And China thought that Nehru is now backing out at the behest of USA. So they wanted to teach a lesson to India. So that is how the war took place. As things stand today, see, the things have, though we are not what we were there in 1962, because our boys fought with 100 rounds and they were all running around. Indian Air Force, and I forgot the point, the Indian Air Force, why wasn't it used? It wasn't used because the IB said, again, B.N. Malik's assessment was that the terrain is not conducive for the use of Air Force, and therefore we should not use the Air Force there. And also that second point was that PLA Air Force was much stronger because they have MiG-19 and MiG-21 at that particular time, very offensive. But the point is that neither the Indian Air Force nor him understood that Chinese Air Force had to operate from mainland China. In Tibet, they had no Air Force.
Yes, anyway, I think we're a little strapped for time. But, the fact remains that 62 years later, there are certain decisions taken then which are still affecting us very adversely. And it now remains to be seen, yes, one aspect is that whatever is given out in the Henderson Brooks report, that should be made, that should be declassified fully. And it now remains to be seen how the government, will, deal with whatever incursions that have occurred over the years since 1962 and what was added as a second Chinese aggression in 2020.
See, I'd like to make a comment here before we get
briefly.
The Henderson Brooks report. They say it is leaked out and something, and Maxwell had made certain observation on this in his book, India-China War. One thing is, the Henderson Brooks reports is in 2 parts. Part 1 has got 4 chapters. Part 2 is hardly anything. It is the lessons learned, tactical lesson, that thing. Basically, the thing which is going against the whole thing, publication of this Anderson book report is part 4, where damning remarks have been made by the report, where it blames not Indian Army, not the government, but the intelligence agency, which probably is manipulated by the foreign intelligence agencies. That is why this report is not being declassified by the Indian Army, by the government of India. That is the main reason. And I probably feel that part 4 is a must. And we require a truth commission. India should ask for a truth commission as to what exactly had happened, because we don't know. We are only blaming the Indian Army. We are only blaming the government of that time, but we don't understand the role played by the intelligence agency to provoke this war. Particularly IB, at that particular time, India had no other intelligence agency other than IB, and this IB was only for internal information, internal intelligence, not for external intelligence. Now, as coming to your question, 1 minute I'll take. So what exactly is the position? We should know in 1967, at the Nathula Pass, Chinese were plastered very badly, and therefore they had to run for their lives. Then again in 1987, they suffered the same humiliation. Again, come back to Galwan in 2020, 15 June 2020, though they haven't disclosed their casualties, but they are much more. As per the Russian and the Americans, the casualty of China was 106.
They are much more than 43. They may go up to over 100 even.
100. So therefore, Indian Army is not what it was in 1962, when our boys fought with, in the winters of December, they fought in OG clothes and jungle boots in the area of the snow, and 100 rounds each man had on him. Today, it's entirely a different thing. In defensive position, yes, we are going to give them a very bad time to Chinese if they try to do anything. In offensive role, probably we may not be that good at the moment. And that is why we need to, but China has built, thereafter China has created a lot of facilities which we haven't done all along our border. We kept, and the government, which before the present government, they have been saying not to do anything about on the border because Chinese will make use of it. And that is why our mobility and our deployment of forces was a problem, which the work is started now.
Thank you very much, Colonel Kushwaha, for all the inputs that you brought out. Look forward for another session on the Henderson Brooks report, certainly at some stage, if it can be, we must hope for it to be declassified. Thank you very much. All the best.
Okay. Thank you, Anil. Thank you.